So welcome to the Colloquium presentation by Dr. Eishita. We are lucky to have her today. Dr. Farjana is an assistant professor at the Department of Computer Science at the Idaho State University, where she is currently in the RIFE laboratory, where her research focus is analyzing the augmented and virtual reality game experience and their impact on diverse sectors such as health and education. It would be an exciting and interesting to learn about her research. So thank you, Dr. Farjana, for joining her. Whenever you are ready, you can start. Thank you.
Right, great. Thank you so much. I believe everyone can hear me. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. And it is an absolute honor to be here to be able to talk a little bit about my research. I appreciate and thank all the organizers for doing this. All right, before I start talking about research, I think I will talk a little bit about myself. I am currently working at the Idaho State University. I completed my PhD in computer science from the University of Saskatchewan. After that, I worked at the University of New Orleans a little bit, and then I got here. So I would say it has been quite a journey, going to school in North, going back, going to South, and coming back to again North. So lots of experience, and I am very much grateful for that, for all of it. All right, so before I start again, the actual topic I get in there, I will just go through quickly with some of the keywords that I'll be using throughout my presentation. So let's begin with the keyword that is the serious game. That is kind of the key focus for today's talk. So the video games that we say that we played electronically, and this is a very popular laser time activity. However, when we call or talk about this serious game, it is kind of those video games that have purpose beyond just the entertainment. So we really narrow it down, its focus above entertainment. So it will have some particular focus or goal based on where we're applying it. When we're talking about that, so we can say that serious games can be applied in many different sectors. So it could be training to train some trainee about some particular focus. It could be nursing. It could be healthcare providers. It could be any operator, okay? Or maybe just learning, for example, some road rules, anything, okay? Creating some awareness where it could be really boring to, go through some of the rules and regulations so that we know things well. Games can give you that idea in a way better, or I shouldn't say better, it should be a more entertained way. And when I'm saying that entertainment, that we can also incorporate in the field of education. So I'm sure some of you or all of you may have heard that is the term we call edutainment, where we learn through game a particular topic that we're willing to focus at a time. And then comes the health sector. So it could be physical health, it could be mental health, and our today's focus will be looking at how we can get some benefits applying these concepts of serious gaming in health. If I want to be more particular, like which sector of mental health we are willing to focus, we are looking towards the mental health. And one of the projects that I will talk about is the screening sector, and this is a single player game. And the other one is some sort of treatment, and that is also a single player game. So our route would be starting from serious games to screening the mental health and providing or enhancing the efficacy of the treatment of one mental health disorder. So that being said, when we are talking about these serious games in mental health, there could be different media that we could use. Like, so we are all familiar with playing games in PC. That's what we started with. At least our generation did it. And then now we have the handheld device that kind of improved the accessibility. At the same time, we have PlayStations, and like the most recent sensation is our virtual reality environment that you can access through a headset. So I will mostly talk about today the handheld and the virtual reality setup for two of my projects. So we are focusing in there. Okay, so the next one that I will be using very frequently is known as player experience. It is an extension of user experience that is particularly used for game research. If we want to see a top-level view of player experience, what is it? We can say this is a measurement of enjoyment that people are having when they're playing a game. Well, that could sound really very, as I say, top level. How do we measure this? How do we know that what enjoyment or what kind of enjoyment are they having? When I get into my project, I will be dividing them into factors so that it's easy to assess, understand, and analyze. So just bear with me. Thank you. Okay, so the next one is cognitive behavioral therapy. It is a talk therapy where the healthcare providers target to treat patients' mental health disorder. There are many different kinds of cognitive behavioral therapy. Certainly, I am not an expert of that field. So for the projects that I'm going to talk about, we have active clinicians who are working with us, so we get their valuable input for our projects. So we are going to talk about two different cognitive behavioral therapies that we have incorporated in our game. At least we tried to. I'll show the results at how things are looking. But yeah, this is a talk therapy, and different kinds of treatments are designed for different kinds of mental health disorder. So let's get into the actual talk overview. I will quickly go through what motivated us to do this work, and based on that, why would we bring that video games? Okay, I'll touch a little base of the previous work. Like there are many that are, but I will just pick a handful of them that are really close to our actual research. And I'll just set that very top level research question, that what we wanted to look at, and then how we divide it into our projects. And that covers the approach, and we'll talk about a little bit of the future direction and how it impacts our society in a broader range. Okay, so the motivation comes in from truly after the COVID-19 situation. So you know that of course, COVID-19 was itself a very challenging time, and this has increased the mental health difficulties among people worldwide. That being said, two things arises. The first, that you cannot visit a clinician when you need a mental health support because of the quarantine and every regulation that started there. At the same time, many people lost their jobs, and the stress and anxiety and depression went to its peak. Okay, so we wanted to find that, okay, what could be a middle ground in there? Okay, so you cannot go see a clinician in person because of all the restrictions. And some people, they're not very good at expressing these difficulties that they're going through due to their stigma. Okay, so how can we incorporate that they don't have to go in front of people and talk loud? Okay, so we wanted to see if there is any way to mitigate that. And we figured out the serious games can be a way to provide this therapy, the way it could be more effective. So why video games? Okay, so when we talk about that, being a compelling stimulant, video games possess the ability to ameliorate people's cognitive, for example, attention or motivational resilience in the face of failure, or emotional, for example, mood management, and some social benefits. And due to, as I mentioned, that since we have the smartphones in our hand, it's way easier to access any kind of game that you want to play with. So it is a device that everyone has. So why not utilize that with video games, which is a natural stimuli? So that brings us in here. And we put those very high level research questions. So can these video games enhance the efficacy of existing strategies? Again, we are not people from psychology, so we are not an expert to kind of put a new psychotherapeutic strategy. So that's not our field. But we wanted to see that whether if we kind of blend in the game mechanic, the games, the concept of video games, if that can help. If it does, at the same time as game researchers, we want to know that how can we incorporate the game mechanics in a way so the player experience is enhanced, and so that psychotherapeutic goal can be achieved. Okay, so that's what we wanted to actually look at from very top level. And there are some, like, as I said, like there are many different games that are available, okay, and that like that too in commercial and research-based games as well. For example, if you can see that the commercial side, like the Pac-Man game, this is one of the first documented and positive usage of commercial video games in mental health. They conducted the people, the inventors, they conducted 2 experiments to favor the initiation and social interaction between the autistic and non-autistic youths. Okay, the training involved the video game Pac-Man and other laser objects, right? So it could be a Walkman or a pack of gum, and autistic youths were instructed to employ in order to approach a peer and engage in an interaction. And there are some other games that are very popular commercially. For example, the Half-Life and the Unreal Tournament, they have occasionally been used as a therapeutic environment for exposing the phobic individuals, like that phobogenic stimuli, And there are a couple of research games as well. I just put one of them in here, and this is known as a Sparks game. It is an interactive fantasy game designed to deliver the cognitive behavioral therapy. In short, we call it CBT. So for the treatment of clinically significant depression. So as I say, that there are many more, but these were some of the closest that we could relate to our current projects. I'll move on to the approach that we decided to analyze our research question, like if this is doable or not. Okay, so we wanted to deploy the existing psychotherapy strategies into the game, if that is doable. And we wanted to analyze that particular game mechanics for that particular game that we are going to build. And we wanted to also investigate if there is any differential impact of these strategies on various personality traits. So we all are individual people. We all have different kinds of personality traits. So we wanted to look to that. Of course, PX is something that we will look into because this is the key thing that a game should have. And we also wanted to see that like a vast amount of people can access to this facility. That was one of the major goals of this project. So I will just mention 2 of my projects. So let's talk about the first one that we named AR COD. Okay, so what is that? This is an augmented reality video game to identify cognitive distortion. So this is what we began with. What is cognitive distortion? So cognitive distortion is simply, in a very simple word, it is negative thoughts, okay? So it is a negative thinking pattern that can comprehend any particular situation negatively and create a depressive or anxious mental state. So you can say that before you are going towards that severe depression or anxiety state, you will have cognitive distortion in yourself that needs to be identified, like what kind of cognitive distortion you have, so that the clinicians can talk to them via CBT, which is a talk therapy, so that they can help cognitive restructuring. So screening those cognitive distortion is crucial. However, so you can ask like, oh, okay, so there must be some way or some like existing technique to identify the cognitive distortions. Okay, so of course there is this traditional questionnaire where you fill out, oh, are you feeling tense or jittery, or those kind of questions in there. So what are the issues that already exist? Why would we like to deploy it in a game? So if I want to mention that the questions in the existing questionnaires that detect the cognitive distortion, they're very straightforward. And sometimes when the questions, the patient or the person who has went to the clinician reading that question, they're unsure about what is going on inside them. Many times it happens that, okay, we're saying or we're trying to believe that, no, we are not feeling any jittery inside us or anything, but it is actually there and we do not know. So from there, we wanted to see if we deploy it in a game, okay, and we set up the scenario in a way so that if you have any cognitive distortion in you, it should come out through the activity of that game. So we wanted to design it in such way. So for this AR card, we wanted to see first, this was our first experiment that we wanted to see that whether a game can detect this cognitive distortion if that person pauses it. Okay, so for the cognitive distortions, if you are familiar or if you want to look at it, there are like plenty of them. So we kind of did our research and we saw like there would be somewhere around 55, 60 that have been identified. But we picked up these 5 cognitive distortions. So the questions could be why. The first is this was our first prototype that we wanted to analyze, and we wanted to pull out 5 very common cognitive distortions that typically has the higher chance to be there among people. And also we wanted to keep the prototype simple, okay? So we picked up this 5 to just see how that proof of concept goes. So we picked up these 5 cognitive distortions and we mapped these 5 cognitive distortions via our game that we named AirCod. So this is a very simple game, and this is an augmented reality game. So you can tell that you can play it anywhere you are. So that kind of hits the goal that we wanted to say initially, that we want to make sure that people are getting those facilities without going to the clinic. Okay, so some remote communication. So we wanted to do it augmented reality so that they're also comfortable in their own environment and can go through that process. So in this game, it's a very simple game. So the goal is you have to find a pet, a virtual pet that you can find by walking around in your own house if you're playing this in your house. And once you have collected the pet, your task would be to look for their food, their shelter, their various other objects that they could use. And to collect those objects, you have to kind of go through some particular games. Maybe you will find the food for your cat by finding 5 letters, and then you unscramble it. This becomes a meaningful word. Once you have been able to do it, you'll find the food for your cat. So you have to take care of them. You have to find their food, their other used object, and then you have to allocate that to your pet. And if you're taking care of your pet really well, it will stick around with you, but it might flee as well if you're not doing a very good job. So what is how are we incorporating these cognitive distortions as the underlying factors? So, for example, we let them collect, as I was saying, like we tell them, okay, you will find the food for your cat if you can find out those 10 letters in 30 seconds, just saying. Okay, so sometimes they fail, okay, or maybe the first time they fail, and they're like, oh no, this is not my thing, I cannot do it, and I can never do good things, and I quit, okay, or I want to skip this part, I don't care, this is just a game. So this might happen in the very first attempt, or maybe at the fifth attempt, okay? So we would like to see that how people are reacting in such situation, okay, after certain times they have failed, or even they have done it the first time, but there will be some other mini game element throughout the whole gameplay so that we can take their input. And then after all these mini games that comes in, they will see a screen that you could see in here, in the blue screen, where they say, oh, okay, so what do you think? Can you go through it after what has happened? And they log their scale in there. So it is as simple as that. And based on their input, this in-game questionnaires, we have compared that how similar it is to the questionnaire that they have done. Okay, so I will talk more about it during the experiment. So yeah, there are some other mini games, as we say, like after collecting those 10 letters, you build 4 words, and you can find some alternatives. And once you are done, it will give you some summary of your gameplay. Okay, you did. So your health was very good. Your pet's health was very good, very bad, or good, or horrible. Okay, so your pet flee. So we didn't keep the dying option that hurt. So we just made them flee. Okay, so that is the this game. So we ran this experiment with 101 participants. Okay, and the age range was between 15 to 40. And what we did actually was we let them fill out the cognitive distortion scale for the questionnaires for this particular 5 cognitive distortions, and they did that, and then afterward they played our game and fill out the questionnaire and return it to us. And this cognitive distortion scale, this is the standard screening tool for the clinicians who use, and it has some certain questions, and it has 7-point scale, and we kind of replicated that structure of scale for our game as well. Right, so we figured out, this was kind of the initial finding, that whatever we are receiving through the game kind of was very similar. So after applying the cosine similarity, we figured, so if you see the values in here for CDAs versus our games, if it's closer to 1, then it is really close to the questionnaire that we had. So we were able to kind of, oh, okay, so I'll get there. So from this numbers, we could say, okay, so our game actually can detect if there is any cognitive distortions or not. But then again, we wanted, as we say, that the people are different, right? It's very subjective, and if there is any way to kind of categorize the personalities, there are some existing tools that, for example, we use the Big 5 inventory, which is known as BFI, and these are the 5 personality traits. And we figured out our participants, like you can see really like more of the people were more like agreeableness, they fall into the category agreeableness and openness. Okay. We really would like to see what happens if we had more participants in the neuroticism or maybe extroversion, but well, that didn't happen. So we cannot really tell. It was like the exact similar number, the sample size was very comparable. But we just wanted to see that how the data were looking based on the numbers we had. So we found out pretty close findings, like how the agreeableness people had the arbitrary inference, which is a higher number. So we picked kind of like some random values in here, and we wanted to see like how close or how they're reacting to this particular cognitive distortion. So here, for example, the agreeableness and the black and white thinking, that was not as close as the previous value, which was the agreeableness, and the arbitrary inference, but I think this is one of the lowest values, if I'm not mistaken. No, the catastrophizing has also a lower value, but yeah, these are one of the lowest values that we got, but they're still pretty close to the comparison. Okay, so they were pretty close. But yeah, with the variation of the numbers of the people of different personality trait, it was hard to reach to a conclusive decision. However, the key goal of this experiment that we wanted to see that can this detect cognitive distortion? Oh, well, it could. So we can say, yes, that was done. And with the same game, now we wanted to focus a little bit on the game environment. We wanted to see, so is there any differential impact finding this cognitive distortion in different game environments? So we first did it in augmented reality. And then we wanted to see, okay, so let's create a separate game environment for them. And let's see how they're doing. Are they feeling more comfortable? They're giving better data. They're more engaged and all that. We wanted to see also if we incorporate different input technique, okay, does that impact differentially? So that was our second question that we put in here. And we wanted to see that does the game environment and the different input technique input the player experience. So there we are again. So we have to figure out the PX. Okay, that's kind of the key goal. So we wanted to see that. And for that, what we did, we replicated the entire gameplay of ARCOD into a 3D game in our handheld device. We're still sticking with the handheld device. For this ARCOD, if this helps, we did all the versions in handheld, okay? So we created this virtual game world for them where they have to kind of do the same thing, finding a pet, finding appropriate food for them, shelter, or whatever. And if you see, there are two different versions that we built in the 3D version. That one has just no button. You can see the top view, the picture on the top. It doesn't have any separate controlling in there, but the latter one has two controls on the two sides. So does this change? Because sometimes it has demonstrated that if you're incorporating some additional input technique that agitates people, they're not like, it's hard. Or sometimes if there is no additional resource, they get like, I can't see anything. What do I do? Those kind of things. So we wanted to see that if that is impacting the PX at the same time, our main goal, which is identifying cognitive distortions. So this time we ran one experiment with 61 and the age range was pretty similar to the one that we did before. And this time we incorporated some questionnaires. And if you already know the CDS, but then you'll see the game experience questionnaire, and we incorporated the intrinsic motivational inventory. These two questionnaires, they have some questions, and it will allow you to log the player's experience right after their gameplay. And from those outcomes, we will be able to see some of the enjoyment factors. If you remember at the very beginning, I mentioned. So it will give you how competent you are feeling, how the immersion was, how the flow of the game, how positive you felt or how negatively you felt. What was the pressure when you were playing and how much effort did you have to put on? Okay, so those kind of things. So now we did that because we wanted to see their player experience. So after we are done with our analysis, we could found some significant difference in our GEC, or the game experience questionnaire. And GEC has 7 components, okay? So it is immersion, flow, competence, positive and negative affect, tension, and challenge, okay? So here you could see that we just put flow, challenge, and negative and positive effect, because these are the ones we found the significant difference in experience based on their, like, if it's AirCod or if it's virtual, or if it's the virtual one with the button. So there we had 3 versions in there. So we did the main effect comparison in here and pairwise, and we found some significance in there too. Okay, so this is IMI. This is the intrinsic motivational inventory. And here, the IMI has 4 factors. One is the perceived competence, tension, pressure, effort, and interest, enjoyment. We did not find any significant difference in interest, enjoyment, and effort among these 3 different versions of the game. However, these 2 had a significant difference while playing this game in a different level, like different setup. So what we did in here, because we wanted to also see that how close their the outcome for the cognitive distortion is, because this is one of the key factors of our research as well. So we wanted to say, and you can see that the values were not very different. They were very close. So if we want to, but overall, they almost all of them have above 85%, I could say. Yes, I could say. So they were higher than 85%, similar to the CDS and versus each of those versions that we had. So if we want to summarize the finding for this experiment overall, the first question that we had, that is there any differential impact in identifying this cognitive distortion based on the game environment? So you're playing in a different environment. No significant difference was found. Like they were okay with both, they were enjoying the game in both environment. However, looking at the values, we could say that, okay, ERCOT performed a little better. Maybe it's augmented reality, their own environment, but yeah, no significant difference was found. The second question that we wanted to see, is there any differential impact on identifying the cognitive distortion? Like you are feeling more agitated, you're having those negative thoughts more if you have a particular input technique, or you're feeling stressed if there is some additional information, or not information, my bad, the mechanics that you could apply for this particular version that we included. So the button, without button, with button, if you remember. So we also didn't find any significant difference in there too. However, there was a significant difference found based on the game environment and different input techniques. So it's AR, VR, not VR, my bad, AR and the 3D version of the handheld game and the different input techniques. So with button, without button. So we found some differences in significant differences in flow, challenge, and positive and negative effect. Okay, so yes, some significant differences were found, and that was something that we wanted to figure out as well. So I will wrap up this project in here. So this is something that we are still working on. The next project that is also going on, which is not yet completed, and we have just been able to develop the very first prototype. I'll show you some of the screenshots of that, okay? But yeah, I really wanted to talk about this one too, because this is one of the sub-projects under the same goal that we had. So this is something that we named Fight Your Fear, and this is a gamified digital intervention where we want to enhance the efficacy for the exposure therapy, and this is particularly for obsessive compulsive disorder. So let's get in there. Again, the motivation in here will tie up to the one that I've mentioned at the very beginning, but this one is very specific towards a particular phobia, and that also has to do with that COVID-19 pandemic. So what happened in COVID-19 pandemic, a group of people, they developed this fear of germs. Okay, so whenever people are sneezing, coughing, there are spittles, and they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to get affected. So this has increased, okay? And according to the psychology specialists, they call it germophobia. So you'll say germophobia or mesophobia or mysophobia. Okay, so these are the 2 terms that has been used for the people who are really phobic to this kind of germs or things. So we wanted to see that how this can be done. Okay, can we help in any way with such people who has this phobia of germs? So we had a very great discussion with our clinical psychologist, and they told us about this therapy that is called exposure therapy. This is also a kind of CBT. What happens in here, where if you are afraid of something, for example, if you're afraid of dogs, the clinicians, they expose you to that object that you are scared of in a very like tiny bit of matter, knowing that it will not affect them negatively. For example, if you show them a picture of dog, they know that this is not going to bite them. Okay, so keeping that risk minimal. So they expose them, and or maybe sometimes they let you think about a scenario. Maybe you're walking down on the your sidewalk and a dog is passing by. So think about that scenario, and they help you reduce that phobia. Okay, so the thing is here that for this exposure therapy, the psychologists, they have to depend on how the patients are imagining. So it entirely depends on how they're processing it in their head, and the people who are trying to help, they don't have the access in there. Okay, or if you show them an image, it's very static. Okay, so and then they give the patient some homework, like go home and think about the scenario and talk more about it. You don't know like how they're dealing or how they're processing. Okay, so from there, we kind of wanted to bring this exposure therapy that we can call like a digital exposure therapy. Okay, we wanted to see if we incorporate again this exposure therapy, can this help, can this improve the efficacy of exposure therapy itself? We also wanted to see, is there any differential impact for different platforms on PX and the effectiveness at the same time? So we now brought in the headgear for the virtual reality and handheld. Okay, so we wanted to see that. And we wanted to also know, is there any particular game mechanic? Okay, because the first question that might come in your mind, hey, well, you cannot compare the VR environment with handhelds because it is so immersive and it is able, but hey, not everyone, especially the targeted group that we are willing to work with, they don't have headset at their home, right? And this is not something we can expect them to have for this treatment, but they have phones. So can we utilize the mechanism that they have already in our hand? So we wanted to see that. How can we balance that? How can we map that? So we wanted to see that. So what we did in here, we developed the first prototype. So it's the plan to develop a full prototype of this game, both VR and handheld. So we have prototypes for both right now, and so that it can help the people that have germophobia or mysophobia. And the key thing is, which is kind of very interesting for this gameplay, that people or the player have to control their heart rate. Okay, so they have to be in a certain level of heart rate to be able to, do the actions or the required actions in the game. Okay, and also, well, our goal is, this is kind of our future goal that we're working on, that we would like to develop a web-based tool for, what is the reason? This should be a modifiable platform for this game where the clinicians will have access and they will be able to set up some gameplay, some objects, some rules, all customizable thing. And the level of exposure, if you remember, I said to you at the very beginning, it really depends on every individual. The level of the phobia differs based on the people. So you do not want to expose someone who's really scared of germs to like a very immersive, that environment which might give them a heart attack. We don't want that. Okay, so we want this to be modifiable from the end of the clinicians too. So this is our very broader goal that we are willing to do. So both of our projects, this project was also, it is also being developed in Unity. We're using the assets of Unity and the web-based database for the data. So here for the game, as I said, so it is a first-person trivia adventure kind of game. If I just tell you the narrative a little bit. So the main character reaches to city where people are affected by this virus and they're coughing and sneezing every time. Okay, but the protagonist has to go and find out a particular formula that will help a scientist build that potion, you know, to create that antivirus, so that the people can get healed. Okay, so this is kind of our top level narrative, and these are, so I know they're not the best because, as I say, like we just built their first prototype, so it's not the best. The top one is a view for our handheld version, and the latter one is the VR version. Okay, there are a huge difference you could see in the visual, at least. Let me go through one by one. For the handheld version, so these NPCs, so our protagonist goes to these NPCs to collect some clues so that it could take him to that secret building where he can find that formula. And they go to this NPC and they're all affected, right, with that virus. So they kind of sneeze and okay, cough. And for the handheld version, the sneeze, the spittle kind of comes on the screen. And the goal is that the people who are phobic to that, they have to kind of wipe it up, okay, to the hand. However, if their heart rate is not controlled, even they're wiping the whole day, it's not going to work. Okay, so they have to calm down, take a deep breath, and bring their heart rate lower so that they're able to wipe up and clear the screen. For VR version, if you know the setup, so you're wearing a headset and you have controllers in your hand, there is not really that option to wipe, or you will not feel that touch or anything. This might seem small, but for this phobic people, it will make a huge difference. So now the question is here. So for the VR version, you'll see we're still struggling with that 3D model. So you'll see like in VR version, it looks like more like bubbles. Some people are making bubbles, so we are still working on that. But at the same time, the VR version has more, immersive environment. So you're closer, the droplets seems closer to your eyes. But well, we are planning to do it using like a wiper or something. For example, you're wearing a face shield and there the droplet came in and you have to do that wiping. But then again, you have to keep your heart rate lower and your data will be logged from a smartwatch that the player will be wearing. So this is where we are at. So we are kind of working in that zone for this particular project. I really apologize for this really tiny text. These are not the best, but this is kind of like a detailed description of our gameplay. Okay, so it just begins that onto that city. The protagonist goes in there and they find a clue. They could the market like the pool. So we are kind of in there. We are kind of in that zone right now. Okay, to kind of figuring out more like the mechanics part. So we hope that we will be reaching there soon at the end. And this is kind of that view of the web-based tool that we are willing to build. So where you will have all these information, the patient's information, patient's chart and everything, and the clinicians will be able to modify them based on their data that they have, and they should be able to deploy their game design, particularly for that person, into their handheld or the VR. Okay, so we did the experiment, like we just did the pilot study. Okay, sorry. We will do the pilot study with clinicians. That is the goal because we need to make sure it is safe, okay? And we need the clinician's approval. And then we have to do some pilot testing with selected sample, which is really hard because finding people with germophobia is challenging. Okay, so we are planning to do that once we are done. We are done with our first prototype for the both platforms. And then we will run the controlled experiments, and that will happen. A portion of will happen with the presence of clinicians, and the rest we will do it in our lab. So yeah, we will do some backend data analysis, and we will also do some player experience surveys, some of them, so positive and negative effects, GEC and IMI, PXI, and all that. And we will also include another survey that is known as Y-Box, and this is the one that determines that what is the level of a person's like the level of being phobic. Okay, so again, the Y-Box is completely from the psychotherapy zone research area. So they suggested us, okay, so we can incorporate the Y-Box to see their progress. So they have played their games for 5 times based on some custom setup, and we would like to give them the Y-Box tool again to see like how well they're doing, or vice versa. Okay, so we are hoping that we will find some statistical significance in there too. And the broader impact for this entire, like all the projects under this hood, is we wanted to build some particular serious game mechanics that is dedicated to the mental health treatment. Mental health treatment is really huge. As you could see, we just targeted those zones that we started with, for example, cognitive distortion, OCDs. And even in OCDs, just the germophobia, okay? So there are lots of things. And this smart health tool that will make the clinicians able to modify and build custom games like for the particular individual. And we want to make sure that people in like various age range and area can access this therapy, because that is one of the key goals. And of course, we are game researchers. We want to make sure the games are fun in the first place so that people are more intrigued to play, and then it could help their mental health if needed. The biggest threat that I was saying and this is common for any HCI researchers, I know, that finding samples, and if you're working with particularly for a health sector, it is even harder. So this is our first challenge, but good news is our university's clinical team, the psychology team, they are a great help. They're open. They say, okay, we'll try to find out more people for the experiment. So we should be happy with that we will make a good progress. And then mapping that gap, that I say, like one side, it will give you that, immersive environment. The other side, you have the handheld, which more people have, so we would like to see that how we can map. One example could be, for example, for the handheld, for this latest game that I showed you, the FYF, you have to actually touch that screen to erase that spittles on your screen. So that is kind of giving you a higher contact. But in VR, again, maybe you're not wiping it out with your fingers, but then again, the bubbles are closer, okay? We have to figure out more ways to kind of map that gap so that, well, we have both platforms and we can make it accessible by many people. And of course, the outcome is very, very subjective. And that's why we wanted to bring in that personality traits. But then again, finding sample for those people, that is challenging. So we are working in there. We're positive that we should make some good progress in the upcoming years. And I'm kind of at the end of my presentation. So these are some relevant articles of ours that I put in here. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed a little bit my talk, and thank you so much for being here. And I'm more than happy to, for any discussion, comments, questions at this moment. Thank you.